and it's 9.
How old is your son?
Oh, my older son is 14 years old, and my younger son is 9 years old.
Okay, because I was thinking, you don't have to like your kid that age older.
You're seeing two things. Kasi hindi siya doon.
Okay, Popdc.
Okay. Alright.
I'll stay for that.
Alright. Popdc started almost 6 years ago.
Wow.
Since then, we have identified almost 200 sites relevant to Philippine American history. This quest has been fulfilling on so many levels. First, we have developed a greater appreciation for U.S. and Philippine history. It is exciting for us to see a building and to know the many interesting stories behind it. Second, we have also met many individuals who generously shared their knowledge and resources with us. One of them is Rita. And I will not tell you who Rita is because you know her already.
Rita?
And third, on a more personal level, Popdc is a family project. We wanted to teach our sons. Please forgive me, but I promised Rafael, the 9-year-old, that I would say this, even if they're not around. That Nicholas and Rafael are the most handsome boys in the universe. So we wanted to teach our sons, Nicholas and Rafael, something about the cultural heritage by seeing firsthand a few places that have significant ties to Filipino history. They have accompanied us to numerous sites, to presentations, and on walking tours. It has been quite an adventure for us. We also wanted to share what we have learned. We created a website initially listing DC sites we have found. So these includes museums, residences, offices, schools, churches, and many more. More recently, we have added stories that we thought are relevant to Philippine American history, but are not necessarily limited to the Metro DC area. We also have a Facebook page. On this slide, we feature a painting by national artist Fernando Amorsolo that was given by future Philippine President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, who was 16 years old at the time, to U.S. President John F. Kennedy. These are a few of our published articles. And on request, we give walking tours. This is a map of a walking tour for the University of the Philippines Alumni Association. And that's Nicholas. Well, Nicholas from 2 years ago, 2-3 years ago. He's taller than me now. So before we share our stories, allow us to point out some important dates. There are 6 important dates. Repeat, just 6 important dates. Prior to 1898, the Philippines was a colony of Spain. After the Spanish-American War happened, the Philippines became a colony of the United States. In 1916, the Jones Law was enacted, promising eventual Philippine independence. We will talk about it in more detail later. From 1919 to 1933, the Philippines sent several Philippine commissions to Washington, D.C. to convince the U.S. government to grant independence to the Philippines. In 1935, the Philippine Commonwealth government was created in anticipation of Philippine independence. In 1941, Japan occupied the Philippines when World War II began. It wasn't until 1946, 1 year after World War II, that the Philippines became an independent country. The Jones Law was a landmark legislation which allowed Filipinos to hold more positions in government in keeping with the U.S. commitment to eventual Philippine independence. The Jones Law is significant, as historians say that it is represented the first time a colonial power promised independence to its colony. Remembering the context of that period, it's the middle of the First World War. The world's powers are holding on to their colonies for many more decades, and in the middle of it all, the world's newest superpower is promising independence and preparing its colony for it by creating a freely elected bicameral legislature. William Atkinson Jones studied law at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville and practiced law in Warsaw before becoming a congressman. While he was a congressman, he also headed the House Committee on Insular Affairs that had jurisdiction over Puerto Rico and the Philippines. He fully supported independence for the Philippines and is the author of the Philippine Autonomy Act, which was later called the Jones Law. He had great empathy for the Filipinos and even visited the Philippines with his wife in 1905. He was much loved by Filipinos. There is a bridge in Manila and a town in Isabela named after him. After he died in 1918, just 2 years after the Jones Law was passed, the Philippine government paid for a monument that was placed on his grave in Warsaw some years after. The monument was still there when we visited his grave 2 years ago. Also, we were fortunate to see his home when the Richmond County Museum held its annual house party there in 2016 to commemorate the centennial of the Jones Law. The Richmond County Museum has a small section about the Philippines and is open to the public if anybody is interested in visiting Warsaw.
Here's a pamphlet about the Jones residence.
Can I say something? Somebody from our group went there and they didn't know what it was about.
Oh, that's too bad.
They said, you know, we went to that event, but we didn't even know.
That's too
Oh,
bad.
that's so...
They said they attended. That's what they told me.
He was born in Norfolk.
Manuel Quezon was a temporary resident of and a frequent visitor to Washington. On his first Christmas in 1909 as a resident commissioner, he described in his biography, The Good Fight, how he left his rooms at the Champlain apartment house on a snowy day, but let me quote, this is what he said, "Rushed back to the apartment fearing that I would lose my ears."
That cold.
Washington also became his home during World War II. On May 13, 1942, when Quezon and his family arrived from the Philippines, President Franklin Roosevelt welcomed him at Union Station, and the Quezon family stayed overnight at the White House, the only Philippine president to do so. The rest of the Philippine presidents stayed at the Blair House across the street from the White House. Afterwards, the Quezon stayed at the Shoreham Hotel and also stayed in Burke, Virginia at the Hurley Estate, which is now known as the Belmont Country Club. On August 30, 1916, Resident Commissioner Manuel Quezon hosted a banquet at the then new Willard Hotel's Red Room to celebrate the enactment of the Jones Law. He also wanted to say goodbye to his many friends in the U.S. Congress as he was leaving for the Philippines the following day. Though Quezon was the evening's host, his guests presented him with a gold watch and took turns giving speeches honoring the work he had done on behalf of the Philippines. Quezon, in turn, presented Representative William Jones with a silver cup, which, by the way, can be found at the Jones House today. Near the end of the banquet, a motion picture depicting key events leading to the drafting of the Jones Bill and its enactment was shown. Popdc helped recreate the historic dinner in 2016 celebrating the passing of the Jones Law. The U.S.-Philippine Society organized a dinner at the Romulo Hall of the Philippine Embassy. We first learned of the menu from the book of Feliz Santa Maria, the Governor General's Kitchen. From there, we traced the original menu and details of the dinner from Revista Filipina. We had the menu translated and asked Luis Florendo to recreate the dishes. The Washington Post published an article about the dinner. The Philippine Constabulary Band toured the United States in the 1900s. At the 1915 San Francisco Fair, John Philip Sousa, who was, as you know, the conductor of the U.S. Marine Band, thought it was the best band in the world. He conducted them as they played his Stars and Stripes Forever. According to one account, he said, "When I closed my eyes, I thought it was the U.S. Marine Band playing." Now, some of you may know that the band first played in the U.S. during the 1904 St. Louis Exposition. Colonel Loving was their band leader at that time. We all have strong feelings about the 1904 fair, but the band's performance at that fair quickly became legendary. Even now, it is easy to find multiple references to that performance. They were playing the William Tell Overture. That's the Lone Ranger theme. That's what my husband tells me. In the middle of their performance, the lights went out. Some think it was sabotage, but they kept playing anyway. They had memorized the entire score. Their director, William Loving, conducted in the dark using a white handkerchief. They placed second out of the best bands in the world. As for Colonel Loving, who would retire some years later, but would be called in from retirement to become the band's advisor. He's thought to have died at the liberation of Manila in 1945. When the Tafts moved into the White House, they brought with them acquisitions from their Philippine residents, including wicker and teakwood furniture and oriental tapestries. Their indispensable Filipino valet, Monico Lopez Lara, the press referred to him as a bright young Filipino, joined the White House staff and merited feature articles in some U.S. newspapers and drew some speculations about his civil service status and pay. The Washington Times reported that Monica would not be placed in the government payroll but would remain a private employee of the president. The Tafts also favored garden parties, much to the consternation of the White House staff. Chief Usher Ike Hoover thought the idea impractical. The bugs and the dampness on the balcony did not compare with the quiet comfort of the indoors, he said. Here they are performing a Taft's inauguration in the middle of a blizzard. And this was in March. The Tafts asked them to perform at the inauguration. Now, you may be wondering what they sounded like.
You got it? Wow.
They're really good. It's not quite 1909, it's from 1910, but that's close enough.
So that was a
That's
1910 recording of the Philippine Constabulary Band playing La Sampaguita. Irwin found it on the website of the University of California, Santa Barbara's Davidson Library. The recording was made on a cylinder. That was how they made recordings on phonographs then. A month after the inauguration, the First Lady drove alone to a recently built road called the Speedway. The Speedway was later renamed Potomac Drive along the Potomac River. Her choices were swift. The location of the park, close to the Speedway, Potomac River, and tidal basin. The inauguration day, April 17th, and the days of the new concert series, Wednesdays and Saturdays. Mr. and Mrs. Taft loved Luneta Park in Manila, and they loved the Sunday concerts at the park where the Philippine Constabulary Band performed regularly. The Tafts wanted something like it in DC, so on April 17, 1909, they held the inauguration of West Potomac Park, featuring the Philippine Constabulary Band. Subsequent concerts would feature the U.S. Marine Band. I first learned about Galo Ocampo from my brother-in-law, Hector Tiongson. Hector wrote an article about Galo Ocampo that was published in Positively Filipino. Hector said that in a history of Philippine modern art, Ocampo is often described as a member of the triumvirate with Victorio Edades and Carlos V. Francisco, though the lives of those two other artists seem to have been documented more widely. According to Hector, the triumvirate valued realism, which went against conventional arts. The Brown Madonna seen here is an example of Ocampo's depiction of realism in art.
So this was the first time they had depicted the Blessed Virgin Mary as Filipino and not as a Westerner. So it was quite controversial when it first came out.
I can imagine.
During World War II, Galo Ocampo did covert work in the Philippines. During the Historia, one of the Historias, his son Mitch Ocampo told us how Ocampo secretly transmitted messages through movie billboards by using pre-established symbols and codes. The information Ocampo retrieved and transmitted helped track enemy movements. He also designed the Philippine Seal, which was approved by the Philippine Congress in 1946. His sons, Dennis and Mitch, gave us a keychain showing the seal. So we have it here, and we'll pass it around.
So we think it was the final act of the Philippine Commonwealth, July 3, 1946, the day before independence. They made that the official symbol, which was designed by Galo Ocampo.
So he did many more things. He was professor at the University of Santo Tomas and headed the Fine Arts Department of the Far Eastern University of the Philippines. He was also the director of the National Museum of the Philippines. Now, Galo Ocampo is interesting to us because he was an Arlington resident. Mitch and Dennis Ocampo explained that the family left the Philippines in the 1970s because the political climate made them uneasy. This was at the height of the authoritarian rule of Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos. Martial law had just been declared, and Galo and Loretta Ocampo were very much concerned about their children's future. One of Galo Ocampo's last works is a painting of Saint Anne. It showed her dressed in glowing colors of red, purple, and yellow, and a young Mary in a pure white gown hovering over Saint Anne's Church. It is on display at the Rectory of St. Anne's, the only known Ocampo painting currently on display in the public building in the Metro DC area. We wanted to end with this image. This is the Hurley Mansion in Ashburn, Virginia. In Manuel Quezon's writings, he refers to it as Leesburg. Today, it is the Belmont Country Club. In the summer of 1942, Quezon's family lived here soon after escaping from the Japanese and just before moving to the Shoreham Hotel. This is a famous photo of the Commonwealth government in exile taken at the same spot. There are many extraordinary individuals in this photo. There is General Carlos P. Romulo, who was a Pulitzer Prize winner, who later served as President of the United Nations General Assembly and briefly as chair of the UN Security Council. 2, there is Fanny Aldabalim, who became the first female cabinet member of the Philippines. 3, there is Arturo Rotor, a medical doctor after whom a type of jaundice is named, based on path-breaking research he conducted at Johns Hopkins. And there's more. He was also a prize-winning author, a member of the first generation of Filipino writers in English, along with Jose Garcia Villa, Carlos Bulosan, and others. He also liked orchids and knew a lot about orchids, and there is an orchid variety named after him. In 1942, he was secretary to the Philippine Cabinet. There are also a few individuals who stayed on in the Metro DC area, passed the war, raised families, and lived quiet private lives. Where they lived, where they worked, where they sent their kids to school in the Metro DC area, their lives reflecting the opportunities and constraints of the period. We know some of these because their lives have been documented by Rita Cacas in her book. We wanted to end with this image because, in many ways, it reflects what are our best hopes for Popdc. We are inviting people to take a second look at the Metro DC area and at the buildings and street corners around us. We are immersed in the rich, colorful legacies of Philippine American history and culture. They are not always readily visible, but they are there if you look hard enough. Thank you.
Very good.
Oh.
Congratulations.
So